Hey everyone, welcome. I'm Dr. Christine Keisinger, and I want to welcome you to our second week of our series on cultivating steadiness during anxious times. Perhaps you've been here with us all along, perhaps you're joining us for the first time, or perhaps you'll be listening or watching the recording of today's session at another time. Regardless, I welcome you along with the entire Studio B team. If you were here with us last time, we began moving through what is called the Whole Health Karen. And this is really a way for us to begin looking at what makes for a whole life, a healthy life. And part of that is really beginning to contemplate what steadiness is built on. If you remember, and I'm going to bring the image up in a moment, the Karen is based in nature on a very, very important foundational stone. And that foundational stone is the stone of intuition. And if you were with us on Monday, we spent a lot of time not only talking about what is meant by intuition, but also talking about how we can cultivate it, how we can increase our capacity for it, but most importantly, where intuition lives in the brain and how it's activated, and the way in which it's actually connected to our physical gut and the physical heart. So I encourage you to look at Monday's recording if you haven't had a chance to do that, or if you weren't with us on Monday, so that you can get a really strong foundation in the notion of intuition. I'm just going to take a moment and I'm going to bring up the slides. So we're only going to work with one slide today. And that slide is the Karen itself. Let me just bring that up fully here. So again, you see intuition. Dr. Lissa Rankin, who came up with the Whole Health Karen, again, places all of our health, all of our well-being on the foundation of our intuition, which she calls our inner pilot light. The last time we were here, we started looking at the notion of physical health. And the question that we want to ask of each and every one of these stones, or actually it's not even a question, it's more of a statement, a sort of a fill in the blank. And let's just take physical health as an example. I am at my best physically when? How would you complete that sentence? And I gave you some ideas of how you might complete that sentence the last time we were here. One of the things that I talked about, because it's been a really easy protocol and template for me to follow, is a template that I was introduced to when I was moving through my studies as an integrative health practitioner. And the particular program that I was part of had these 6 really important pillars of what made for sound physical health. And I reviewed them on Monday, but I'll give them back to you here. One, and the first, was actually hydration. How hydrated are you? And we took a very, very deep dive into the importance of hydration, not just for our physical body, but also the role that hydration plays in our cognitive functioning. I know that I operate at my best when I'm well hydrated. So hydration, nourishment or nutrition, that shouldn't surprise any of us. Movement. Are you moving every day? And by movement, we want to broaden and expand our notion of movement to include things like walking, things like stretching, things like yoga, gentle movement, in addition to more intense cardiovascular movement. But are you moving in some way every day? This is really important to so many of us right now. So many of us who are working at home, I know that movement is exponentially more important for me now because I'm doing so much more of this kind of work, teaching through this modality. I move a lot when I teach live. I'm walking around the room, I'm wildly gesturing, I'm moving a lot, but I'm much more confined in my movement in this setting. And my body has been screaming in resistance to that because I'm sore. So gentle movement, stretching, frequent walks throughout the day have been really important to me. And they're helping me to operate at a much higher level than I would be if I wasn't moving regularly. So hydration, movement, nourishment. I like the word nourishment over nutrition because it feels good. How am I nourishing myself? One of the habits that I've gotten into every day around this time is a cup of lavender and chamomile tea. Now, normally, this is a tea that I would drink in the evenings before bed, but my own anxiety level has been much higher than it's been in the past. And interestingly, it's been much higher in the last 2 weeks than it has been in the last 8 weeks. So the lavender and chamomile tea at about 2 p.m. has been really, really important for my system. Again, it's contributing to my being able to operate at a much higher level than I would without it. Sleep. I got very serious about my sleep 2 weeks into our stay-at-home orders. I was staying up much later. I was getting up much earlier, and my sleep was interrupted. So I really had to put a stop to all of that, making sure that I was going to bed at the same time, making sure that I was waking at the same time, Monday through Sunday, all week long, 7 days per week, making sure that if I had a little patch of time during the day, that I would give myself permission to take that 10 to 20 minute nap, which is really, really nurturing for me and very, very beneficial. I benefit greatly from those kinds of periodic daily shutdowns. Watching my caffeine intake, watching alcohol intake, and the impact that those things can have on sleep. I've had to be very vigilant about those things recently. So again, hydration, nourishment, movement, sleep, breath. I hope that on the Tuesday and Thursday sessions that you're learning a lot about breath and the power of your own breath to hack into your central nervous system and move you out of stress response and into a calmer state. Yesterday, it was very apparent to me that I needed some very intentional and very deep breath work because I felt so constricted in my chest and solar plexus. That only comes about as a result of having a lot of body awareness, which I've had to develop over time. And I have to remind myself through this particular phase and period of time, which is really overwhelming and anxiety provoking at times, to really touch into my body. What is my body telling me about what I need? And breath work is often the answer. And then finally, and I talked a little bit about this on Monday, detoxification, sweating intentionally. Thinking periodically about both your urinary and your bowel function. Are you expelling? Are you releasing? So if you were to just take those 6 things, hydration, nourishment, movement, sleep, breath, and detoxification, and sort of make a list and ask yourself the question, break it down, right? I am at my best physically when? How would you answer it? Where do you stand on things like hydration, movement, breath, sleep, nourishment, detoxification? Which of those 6 pillars can you see that you need to bring to the forefront of your daily life because they need some work and they're going to support you? They're going to really, really lift you up into a higher level of functioning at the physical level. So there are lots and lots of different ways that we can talk about this stone. I could spend a week talking about the physical health stone, but I just wanted to give you some things to think about. I am at my best physically when? Jot down 3 to 5 things, and then my invitation to you is to see if over the course of the next week, just break it down. Can you work on just one of those 3 to 5 things? And then maybe the following week, add a second, and then a third, so that that stone becomes strong, and that stone becomes a very, very important part of the overall balance of the Karen that is your life. The stone of mental health. I invited you to take a screenshot of this image, or if you'd like, you can simply Google the words Whole Health Karen, C-A-I-R-N, and you can download a copy of this image. And my invitation to you is to just take notes in each stone as to what is most supportive to you. But in the mental health stone, I also like to include the word emotion, mental and emotional health. Again, we can talk about this stone for a month in terms of all of the things that we ought to think about and inquire about when it comes to our mental and emotional health. I'm just going to highlight a couple of things, and I'm going to pose these things to you as questions. For example, how resistant have you been as of late, mentally and emotionally, to what's going on? How resistant have you been to the uncertainty, the overwhelm, the sensation of anxiety? How resistant have you been to the sadness that you might be feeling, the loss that you might be feeling? So we can do this when the difficult feelings come up. Resistance. We can also allow ourselves to be completely overwhelmed. It's sort of like the tsunami wave. And then the third option we often find ourselves in is a shutting down and just coming into that frozen paralysis mode. When you ask yourself, or when you think about the sentence, I am at my best mentally and emotionally when? How would you finish that sentence? I am at my best when I don't resist. I'm at my best when I'm self-aware enough to know that I don't allow the tsunami wave. I am at my best when I don't go numb. And I do all of those things, by the way. But I'm at my best when I make a decision or choose to do something different. So just consider those things. Other things to consider. What is the lens through which I'm looking at this particular situation, especially if it's something that's upsetting to you or really challenging? How can I see this in a different way? Is there something here that I'm not seeing? Is there a new perspective that I might want to just try on, if just for a moment, to see if it creates a shift for me out of my own suffering? One of the things that can contribute very powerfully to our mental and emotional health is a critical question that Dr. Brené Brown has raised in quite a bit of her work as of late. But it's also a question that is actually a prominent one that exists inside of the work culture. If you work with and for Brené Brown, this is a question that they actually ask of each other. And it's a question that can, again, take us out of reactivity and into responsiveness. So let's say that I'm really upset about something that has happened between myself and a colleague. And I've got all kinds of stories running through my head about what happened, about what it might mean, about how I handled it or didn't handle it, about what I might do going forward. But all of this is living in my head. And I'm just ruminating about it. And it's just churning inside of the confines of my own mind, causing a lot of, just feeling really ill at ease or feeling really chaotic. So the question that Brené Brown encourages us to ask is a very simple one, but it's very powerful. She encourages us to go to that person. And we go to that person and we say, hey, Sarah, I need to tell you that the story I'm telling myself about what happened between us yesterday is, and then I finish that statement. The story I'm telling myself about such and such is, and finish that statement. And when I put that out there, as I'm telling myself a lot of stories, or this is the story I've woven, or I, have concocted about what happened, then Sarah actually has an opportunity to say, oh, Christine, I don't see it that way at all. Or that's not what I was thinking, or that's not how I experienced the situation or you. Or she might say, yeah, you're right. And it's an opportunity for us to talk about what has been living inside of my own mind as a really troubling and challenging issue. This little tidbit of information for me has been a real game changer. And it takes a lot of courage to show up to someone in your life and to say, hey, I just want you to know that I'm telling myself this story about you or about the situation. What do you think about that? It's really a form of perception checking. Because if I let that story run wild in my own mind, we know that cliche perception is reality in so many ways is true. Are my stories my reality? And have I ever even checked them out? For my emotional and mental well-being, checking out the stories, because I am a storyteller. I am a great storyteller, most often to my own detriment. So having that tool is invaluable. And I know that it contributes very greatly to my ability to keep that stone strong and stable so that it's not causing upheaval in the other stones. I want to share a quote with you that I came across just the other day related to the difficulty of some of the feelings that we find ourselves grappling with all the time, in every area of our life and at all phases of our life, but particularly now as we find ourselves in this global pandemic. And I just want you to maybe close your eyes and to just kind of take this in and maybe ask, how does this feel for me? What does this teach me? All right. Pema Chodron writes, feelings like disappointment, embarrassment, irritation, resentment, anger, jealousy, fear, instead of being bad news, these are actually very clear moments that teach us where it is that we are holding back. Wow, I want to stop right there. Think about this. Think about times when you have felt disappointment, embarrassment, irritation, fear, resentment, anger, and jealousy. Think about times when you have felt those things. How are they holding you back? If I feel any of these things, I am not moving forward. I am being held back. So she writes, these are very clear moments that teach us where we are holding back. They teach us to perk up and to lean in when we feel like we'd rather collapse or back away. Because I want to back away, or I want to collapse when I'm feeling those things. So what would it mean instead if I were to lean in to the anger, lean in to the envy, lean in to the fear? These kinds of feelings are powerful messengers that show us with terrifying clarity exactly where we're stuck. Again, wow. These feelings are messengers that show us with terrifying clarity exactly where we're stuck. In the moment of feeling these things, this moment is the perfect teacher. And lucky for us, this teacher is with us wherever we are. Why is that relevant to the mental and emotional health stone? It's relevant because it reminds us of how important it is to practice allowing the fear, allowing the anger, allowing the disappointment. Jealousy and envy are really tough to allow. But when I feel them, I'm stuck. And they teach me, hey, right now you're stuck. Take a look at this. Take a moment. Let this be here as your teacher. And this teacher is with us all the time. So can you allow? This is a really important part of what it means to be mindful and the mindfulness trainings, especially as they relate to feelings, difficult feelings. When I can allow what's there, I don't have to like it, but when I can allow it, all the charge really starts to drop away and to diminish. I am at my best mentally and emotionally when I can allow. Again, lots and lots of different ways that we can think about mental and emotional well-being. What things need to be in place in order for you to feel you're at your best mentally and emotionally? Make that list. Consider bringing those qualities in slowly over time, maybe just working on one. And start to notice, wow, mental emotional health stone is connected to my physical stone, because when I'm not sleeping, my mental and emotional health is not stable. When I'm not eating in nourishing ways, it affects my mental and emotional health. When I'm not moving, it affects my emotional and mental health. Similarly, when I am running a story in my mind that's causing all kinds of suffering, and it's one that I've never checked out with another person or the person that I'm telling the story about, that affects my physical health. So we start to see, and this is something I mentioned when I introduced this model, that all of these stones are interrelated. Money. When I teach the whole health, Karen, a lot of people say, why is money there? Here's the truth about money. Money is fundamentally important to our well-being. Money is fundamentally important to our survival. It's fundamentally important to the dreams we hold, the aspirations we have about the kind of lifestyle that we would like to lead or live in that best supports who we are. It is a really important stone. It's a very important stone as it relates to our mental and emotional health and our physical health. Think about all of the ways that your money situation, whatever it is, has had an impact on the ways in which you were able to care, or perhaps not able to care for your own physical health or the health of your family. Think about the way in which money has either provided you with access to mental and emotional health, well-being intervention, or it has prevented you from having access to that kind of intervention. Money relates to our mental and emotional health because when we have worries about money, it can be a very, very critical, almost earth-shaking, have earth-shaking impact on our mental and our emotional health. When I look back at my own life, particularly during my days of being a graduate student, and how I often went week to week just not having any idea about how I was going to survive financially. There were a lot of sleepless nights that I endured that had an impact on my mental, emotional, and physical health because money was an issue. One writer and scholar and teacher that I really admire, his name is Jerry Kalana. He wrote a book very recently called Reboot, and the subtitle is Leadership and the Art of Growing Up. It's a fabulous book that takes a pretty cutting edge approach to leadership. And part of the subtitle that's really important is the art of growing up part. How critically important it is for us to grow up, meaning to get really emotionally intelligent if we are to lead effectively and if we are to lead authentically. What's really interesting about his book, which by the way, one of my favorite mindfulness meditation teachers, Sharon Salzberg, actually writes the foreword to this book. One of the interesting things about the book is part of growing up that Jerry Colonna addresses. In the opening chapters of this book, sort of step one to his process is getting really, really clear about your relationship to money. So some of the questions that he inspires us to ask, and I just want you to sort of just see how these feel for you as you hear them. And again, close your eyes if you'd like and just kind of take them in. How did your relationship to money first get formed? If you were to go back to that first family, meaning family of origin, whoever was there, whoever your primary caregivers were, what did they teach you about money? How did what you learned very early on about money, how did those early ideas that you formed about money, how have they impacted the work that you do in the world and the choices that you made professionally along the way? How has money, or how does money, impact your definition of success and your understanding of failure? How does your relationship to money, the value you place on it, the rules that you have about it, how does this relationship impact how you feel about yourself, your own sense of self-esteem and self-worth? These questions are very, very deep questions that get to the heart of this idea that we all have our own relationship with and to money. How conscious are we of that? Where did that come from? Is my relationship to money, does it serve me well in my adult life? Sort of interrogating, what are my thoughts and values and beliefs about money, and are they mine? Did I choose these? Or were they chosen for me? If I had to come up with a term or a phrase to describe the overarching narrative about money in the home I grew up in, it was deprivation, lack, and fear of not having enough. Even if there was abundance, there was always the message, this could be taken from us at any time. That money was something to be afraid about. That there was never going to be enough. And that you had to work really, really hard, even if you hated the work that you did, so that you could get by. Now, these were messages that as a child were terrifying. And I know people that grew up with very, very different messages about money. That money is plentiful, that abundance is real, that there's always enough, that one could aspire to be better than fine. So just take some of these ideas in and think about that stone and the impact that it has on your mental, emotional health, on your physical health. And again, completing the statement, I am at my best. I am at my best around money when? How would you respond to that statement? That's a tough one. And if it's a tough one for you, you are not alone. I've taught through this, Karen, more times than I can even remember. And this stone brings up a lot. Initially, people just think it's not very important until we really start to think about it in the ways that I just described. And suddenly, we spend a lot of time on this stone. But ultimately, the invitation is to get to a place where your values about money, what it means in your life, your values about how to spend it, saving it or not saving it, whatever it is you want to do with it, that those values are yours and that they are values and ways of relating to money that you've chosen for yourself. More important or equally important is if you are cohabitating, if you are in a marital relationship, long-term commitment, if you are managing money with another person, having really clear and direct and honest conversations about these very things. Many relationships, and we know this, studies have indicated that there are 3 things that often contribute to the demise or the dismantling of a relationship. Inability to resolve conflict effectively, incompatibility around intimacy, how we like to be intimate, and number 3, money. Differences in our values and beliefs around money. That's a very compelling fact. So again, I am at my best related to money when? What do I want? What do I want this stone to look like moving forward? Environment. Look at how environment holds up physical health, mental health, and money. So there's 2 ways that we want to think about the environment stone. The first way is the most obvious, and that is, what environments are optimal for you. I am at my best environmentally when. How would you complete that sentence? So we want to think about the physical environment within which you spend most of your time. You've all had experiences where perhaps your space was too small and too cramped, and you just were not functioning optimally in that space. Sometimes it's just too big. It's too big for you. It's too big for your family. Sometimes there are aspects of space that don't resonate with who we are. We know that in terms of corporate and organizational life, choices that are made about workspace, work environment, contribute in very significant ways to the kind and the quality of work that actually gets done. You want to think about environment as that which holds people. It's like the space of my home holds me. Environment has always been very critical for me and something that I've always been very intentional about creating. I know that my environment has to feel a certain way in order for me to feel good, and in ways that affect my physical well-being and my mental and emotional well-being. Think about, when I look back at my past, I think about office spaces that I was able to work in, that, wow, I just thrived in those. I loved my workspace. And because I loved my workspace, my employer got so much more from me. Our office space here at Studio B, which we are not able to occupy, is beautiful. And again, as other people enter into it, almost immediately, I could bet feel really, really good in that space. So I am at my best environmentally when. How would you complete that? But here's the other way that we want to think about environment. We want to think about environment in terms of emotional environments. And this is particularly important if you're living with another person or other people. What kind of emotional environment supports all of us? Again, environment holds us. So when the environment of a family is toxic, when the environment of an organizational culture is toxic, it doesn't hold people properly. It hurts. It feeds and fosters dysfunctional dynamics. So when you think about, and one of the best examples that I can give related to environment, because I've heard stories like this far too many times, especially when I was teaching at the university level, and working with undergraduate students who would come to my office and say, I am not at all happy about having to return home over winter break, or I'm staying on campus all summer, I'm going to take classes and I'm going to work because I don't want to go home. And I don't want to go home because my home life or the environment of my home is toxic or abusive or lonely, whatever it is. In other words, it's much healthier for me to be outside of the environment that is supposed to be home. And we think about how many of us in our young adult lives, when we left our physical family homes, often then created emotional support systems with friends that became our chosen family. You know, these are my chosen family members because we together and collectively have created a relational environment that's really, really healthy for me. It supports my mental and emotional needs, which then, of course, contributes in positive ways to my physical health. So again, how would you complete the statement? I am at my best environmentally when thinking about physical environment and the emotional environments that you find yourself living in on a regular basis. I can't say enough about the creativity stone, and I'm actually going to have to stop myself from sharing all that I could possibly share about the creativity stone because it's so important. And anyone who's here and anyone who's listening, I want you to leave holding in your heart and firmly entrenching in your mind how critically important the creativity stone is. And here's why. We are born hardwired for creativity. It is an innate part of us. And some suggest it is an innate drive that we desire at very young ages to have the ability and opportunities for creative expression. I love to watch my nephews at 1 year old, 1 year old age and 18 months of age. I love to watch what they're doing with toys, just a mishmash of toys. And without any kind of guidance, the way that they are creatively putting things together and pulling things apart, they are creating. And we also know that the 3rd grade year for a child is a really pivotal year. A different kind of learning, unless your child is at a very different kind of school that actually is very developmentally in tune. And not many of our children are in those kinds of environments. But for the most part, and this includes so many of us, 3rd grade year is a pivotal year because what we learn and how we learn starts to change. One of the hallmarks of the 3rd grade year for a lot of children is the introduction of and the heavy emphasis on multiplication and division, that kind of thinking and working mathematically. But we also see a decrease in opportunities for creativity. Your child might have art class once per week versus having a coloring page every day. I remember knowing about this, but then actually seeing it lived out in my own children when I saw that during the 3rd grade year, there was less artwork coming home in their daily folders. I was far less gifted with their little creations, whether it was the painted stone or the painted mug or whatever it is that they might bring home for Mother's Day or Halloween or Thanksgiving. Those kinds of little creations that they would make for us as gifts. Unless our children have grown-ups around them that continue to offer them opportunities for creativity, our creativity opportunities get really turned down. And so what tends to happen as we then advance through the educational system and get older, we begin to develop this belief that you're either creative or you're not. That creativity is reserved for the creatives who are different. And it's just not true. And this is how it's detrimental to us. If you don't proactively feed and nourish this part of you that is innately creative, that wants opportunities for that expression, it will impact your capacity for decision making. It will impact your capacity for discernment. It will impact your capacity, and this is really important now, if you are a business owner or if you are part of a business, especially in a leadership role, you are likely in a position where you are having to reimagine how we're going to do things. Perhaps even reimagining your business altogether. Reimagining, rebuilding, re-envisioning your business, your family, your life requires creative thought. Guess what? creativity cannot be activated fully in a mind that is stressed, overwhelmed, anxious, spinning out of control, full of negativity and despair. Just try it. Try to be creative when your mind is really anxious and out of sorts. So creativity needs space. It needs brain space for full expression, for actually any expression. This is why when creatives say to me things like, I have writer's block, or I haven't been able to pick up my paintbrush, or whatever it is. I haven't been able to, write a new song, or I haven't been able to write any poetry. I'm stuck. One of the first questions I ask is, how much stress is present? And are you coping with it? Let's work on the stress. The other thing that also could be happening that doesn't really have anything to do with stress is, and I'm sure that most of us know this, that there is a percolation period. I know that when I'm getting ready to do something creative or to produce something or to create something new, it has to percolate in me. And if I try to force it before it's time, it creates a great deal of angst, a great deal of suffering that's really unnecessary. So sorting out if you're stuck creatively, is this a result of a lot of stress, or is this a result of it's just percolating? Is something that's important to sort out. Again, our guiding statement, I am at my best creatively when I'm not in stress response. I am at my best creatively when I actually make spaces for creativity. And sometimes what that means for me is when I make opportunities to doodle. Some of my best ideas come through when I'm just doodling. A lot happens for me in the act of coloring. The preponderance of adult coloring books, there we have no, I'm sure you all have those, one or two of those around. If you've never used them, it's a really wonderful way to sort of allow yourself a little bit of time. And you might notice it's really hard to be stressed when you're coloring. It's really hard to be upset and despairing when you're painting, when you're journaling, when you're building your own cairn in nature during a hike. Don't turn that part off. Don't turn that part off. When are you at your best? And what do you need in order for that stone to even be there? It has its place. Sexuality, the sexuality stone. Again, if I were teaching live, you would have a copy of the cairn, and I would also ask you to write into that stone the word intimacy. We want to expand the meaning of this stone. It includes sexuality, but it also includes, maybe even more importantly, intimacy. So we know to our core, we don't need studies to back this up, although they do, but we know to our core that the quality of our relationships impact the quality of our lives. There's no doubt about that. When the quality of your own personal relationships, even if it's one that's really important to you, is suffering, it impacts the quality of every aspect of your life. So when we think about the sexuality intimacy stone, we want to think about what is the quality of those things as they are being expressed in my life right now. It may sound or seem silly, but many of you may have seen the word intimacy broken down into me, see, into me, see. Intimacy, the ability to allow another person to see into me. My willingness to get close enough to you that I can see into you. That takes a lot of courage, a lot of trust, and a lot of vulnerability. One of my favorite writers, Marianne Williamson, talks about true intimacy as emotional nakedness. And she writes about this idea of standing in front of or before another person, naked, with all of your scars and your wounds and, your bright places and your dark places, and just sort of, here it is, right? Emotionally speaking, here I am. And that you're willing to do that in the light of day. Here I am, into me, see. And that you can do that, and the person who's seeing doesn't cover their eyes, doesn't run away, but instead opens their arms and actually says, yes, I see that. And I love that, all of it. And that's reciprocated, that is intimacy. We are all not in a position to have the blessing of that experience all the time. It is something that has to be fostered, and it's something that grows over time, and it is something to aspire to, and it is possible. And one of the key pathways toward intimacy is through self-disclosure. We know there's a direct correlation between our willingness to self-disclose, to share at deep levels, very authentically, what we are feeling, what we are thinking, what we need, what we want, that we're willing to disclose that to another person, and that they take that in and they don't run from it. And that is how we are seen. If I really am open to you seeing me, you will notice in my communication with you that I'm willing to self-disclose, and vice versa. So I am at my best intimately when I am at my best sexually when. These are really important phrases to consider. What would you say? How would you answer? Or how would you respond? How would you complete the sentence? This is a very, very personal stone. But again, if the quality of my life is contingent upon the quality of my relationships, this is a very important stone to consider. It's not left out. This is an important stone at all ages and at all stages of life. Maybe not the sexuality piece, but the intimacy piece. Intimacy, the ability to be close, to be known, to be seen, is something that's important to us as children, as preteens, as teens, as young adults, and in our older years. And that desire and utter need to be seen and known doesn't go away. It stays with us. I'm going to end at spirituality. This stone, as you can see, is pretty big. When we think about and talk about and teach about the spirituality piece, we want to open that up very, very wide. And the way that I like to talk about it is, what is your connection to that which is bigger than all of us? Whatever that means for you. And for some of us, it means God. For some of us, it means, a particular manifestation of God. For some of us, our spirituality is linked to religion, organized practices. For some of us, our spirituality is nature, truth, beauty, love, whatever that means for you. Is this stone being nurtured? I am at my best spiritually when? I am at my best spiritually when I meditate regularly. I am at my best spiritually when I am connected to the God of my understanding. I am at my best spiritually when I create opportunities in my life to be in the presence of beauty, nature. It could be art, it could be music. Last night it was lifting my face to the sky because this vibrant, glowing full moon, which I didn't even know it was time for, was just hanging in a blue sky right at dusk. That fed my need for spirituality. If that word doesn't work for you, you can put any word you want in that stone. But it's so important for us to be connected to awe and wonder and majesty and beauty, whatever that means for you. So I'm going to bring us to a close. We have just 2 stones to look at. So I'll spend a little bit of time on that when I see you again on Monday. Next week, on Monday and Wednesday, is a really important week because it's going to address a really important model that's going to put you in touch with what triggers us. And you're going to be able to leave those sessions with a good sense of very, very specifically what tends to trigger you. That's important for our own self-awareness. And it's really important because it gives us insight into what might be triggering the people around us. And when I have a sense of what's triggering you, especially if you're triggered and I'm sort of the recipient of your agitation or anger or overwhelm or whatever it is, when I can understand what might be behind why you're triggered, I have a much better chance of really coming into a very compassionate response to your being triggered, as opposed to coming back at you with all of my reactivity. So it's good to be here with you today. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow at 2 p.m. with Jen, who'll be offering you some practices. And then don't forget Friday. Friday is always our featured interview guest. And you're going to be really, really interested in that segment. So come back Thursday and Friday, and then I will see you on Monday. take good care. Remember, this week is about exceptional care. Take exceptional care. I will see you soon.